Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Veterinary Business Podcast, where we don't just talk about the future of veterinary medicine, we talk about building it. I'm your host, Don Adeesha, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. As the year winds down, many veterinary practice owners feel the same mix of emotion. Relief, exhaustion, and maybe a little bit of panic. Payroll deadlines, tax prep, scheduling gaps, team fatigue, and somehow you're supposed to plan ahead for 2026 while still putting out fires of 2025. But here's the truth. End of year panic is not a strategy. So today's episode is all about helping you shift from reactive to ready and making sure your team, your finances, and your focus are in order before the calendar turns. And we couldn't have asked for a better guest to guide us through it than Monica Dixon Perry. Monica is a seasoned veterinary management consultant and global speaker with over 2 decades of experience helping veterinary professionals and organizations build strong, sustainable practices. As senior manager at Barry Dunn, she specializes in financial management, personal development, regulatory compliance, and ethical leadership, helping practices strengthen their foundations from inside out. Before we dive into this discussion, we have a special gift for our listeners today. You can book a complimentary practice growth strategy session with Lila, a veterinary marketing strategist who helps practices grow with clarity, alignment, and confidence. In this one-on-one session, you'll receive a personalized review of your online presence, plus a custom 12-month growth roadmap to help your practice attract, retain, and thrive. Claim your free session at www.veterinarybusinessinstitute.com/MSM. Spots fill up quickly, so be sure to grab yours. With that being said, Monica, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast. So, Monica, as we head into the final stretch of 2025, you have a unique vantage point observing dozens of practices. Could you just start by painting a picture for us? What is the general mood or the biggest challenge you're seeing right now among veterinary leaders as they look towards the year end?
So if I'm speaking at a speaking engagement or having a chance to interact with professionals that are not necessarily clients of mine, I do feel that there's a sense of urgency, not knowing exactly, what they need to be doing, preparing for year end. And that's not only for the DVM owners, but for managers as well. So typically with our clients, we do make a concerted effort to help our clients to be proactive versus reactive. So typically, we're helping them gauge things so that there's no end of the year shock or chaos. We actually, for a couple of months now, have been doing year-end tax planning so that if some practices have had a really great year, typically that will, dictate how things are going to look around here in the States, April 15th or October 15th, for filing purposes. So it's one of those things that we help to gauge them, help them to get a better idea of where things sit. When we're analyzing numbers, we typically are always comparing month to month, over year to year, things along those lines, so they see where they've progressed, or if there's been, some challenges or bumps in the road, that we have the opportunity to work through those. So it's, sometimes I'll work with folks, or maybe when I'm first starting to work with them, they meet with, say, their accountant once a year, and it's typically like in November or December. And at that point, when they're going over the year's numbers, it's coulda, woulda, shoulda. So ideally, if you have the opportunity to meet with your accountant more frequently, I think that better prepares folks. And we typically are meeting with our clients once a month. Some we meet with quarterly. But I would say bare minimum, you should be meeting with your accountant quarterly. We prefer monthly because we're able to gauge where a practice is, cheerlead them on if they've had a successful month previously, so that they can continue the month in question. But if there was something that was going on that we needed to address or identify, we actually can be on top of that so that they'll have some momentum, ability to rectify an issue versus letting months go by and not even realizing that there was an issue at all. So I do like how we have the ability to monitor their inventory cost throughout the year. Obviously payroll costs, all the things that are, affecting practices bottom line. And we are also strategic in looking at the revenue. So if we see that certain benchmarks are not being met, we can work with them to focus in on those profit centers where we may need to focus and spend our attention versus, kind of like the blind leading the blind. If you don't know, how are you going to have an opportunity to increase that profit revenue and decrease the expenses to increase the bottom line, the profitability of the practice?
So, Monica, how does poor team planning at year end contribute to perhaps burnout and turnover in the first quarter of the next year? Is that a thing?
Well, I think, definitely. I think about my husband and I just celebrated 22 years of marriage, and thinking about, preparing for the wedding. We were engaged for a year. We planned the wedding. It took about a year to plan for it. And I can't imagine having, to wait for the last couple of months before the wedding to get things in place. So if by chance you're waiting to the last minute, I think pretty much everything in our personal and professional lives, it can be extremely chaotic. It can bring more stress than one needs, to be honest. So this time of year, I think what plagues a lot of folks is that it is coming toward the end of the year. It's for here in the States, we have November. That's a big holiday month. Toward the end of the month, we have Thanksgiving. And then in December, obviously, there's Christmas. And when there's holidays, obviously kids are out of school, it just adds to your day of having to function as a parent, as a DBM owner or manager. And you're adding a lot in preparation for the year end. You're having to get information together for your accountant. If you have a consultant, I may have you working on projects. So it's just a lot of moving parts, where if you pace yourself, you can be strategic about what we should be doing in first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter of the year, just so that it's easy to maneuver. And I think whether it's planning a wedding or planning a vacation, building a new facility, all those things, I think you have to be strategic so that you don't become overwhelmed. I am naturally a procrastinator. I've been a procrastinator since I was in high school, and I wish I could get out of that. But I know that I actually tend to operate a little bit better when I procrastinate, but that comes with years of perfecting procrastination, if that can be done. But a lot of times that's on me. It's not a collaborative or team effort where I can get things done quickly by myself, but if I have other people relying on me, then that's just not fair. I think that's a disservice to their mental health, their well-being. So I understand when there are things that require me to work more collaboratively with my clients or my team members. That's where I'm not going to procrastinate. I'll have a checklist. I'll have set deadlines and due dates so that I can stay on track with things.
Wonderful. So, Monica, you've led teams, consulted across North America, and even taught veterinary management at NC State. What patterns do you see in practices that handle year-end planning really well versus those that scramble?
Yeah, I really think that my practices who are successful with year-end planning and, from an operational standpoint, from a standpoint of having a pulse on their practice, these are the ones who have organization. I mean, they're organized. They're holding monthly team meetings or healthcare meetings. They are meeting with their accountant, working with their consultant throughout the year. It's just an element of making sure their house is in order. But ultimately, the people that we work with, they're not scrambling. They're monitoring numbers throughout the year. They're looking at KPIs. They're having a pulse on exactly where things stand. And it's not just from a financial standpoint. They are having a well-managed inventory program within their practice. Even when it comes to hiring, recruiting, retaining employees, training, onboarding, how they schedule their team members, how they schedule appointments. All of those things play such a big part in what happens in a practice on a day-to-day basis. So I think that a lot of my practices that approach running a veterinary hospital, owning a veterinary hospital from a holistic perspective, really realizing that it's all intertwined, and you want to make sure that you're not putting attention in one place and neglecting another. So I think that these individuals, they have a great way of balancing, focus areas or focal points so that it doesn't become overwhelming. And I actually just attended a study group with some DVM owners. We were down in Florida this past weekend, and a couple of them are looking for managers. And they're like, I don't know necessarily what a manager should be doing, what I should be doing to oversee and monitor them. And that's whether you know precisely what your managers should be doing and you have a good sense of that. I highly recommend that my owners and managers are meeting once a week. So having once a week, maybe an hour-long meeting offsite, maybe it's, Starbucks for coffee, just where you wouldn't be interrupted. And I like for them to have an agenda that we'll have topics where we will discuss personnel management, we'll discuss financial management, regulatory, just to make sure if there are any issues that have come up with OSHA or WMIS in the in Canada, or anything that's related to DEA or controlled substances, having a plug about marketing. Many practices didn't have to do much marketing during COVID. And now it's almost like pre-COVID that we're, practices are seeing a decrease in volume, and we're having to spend those marketing dollars that we didn't have to for a few years yet. And then obviously, looking at things operationally as to what's working, what's not. So I think it's important that, a practice owner and manager touch base on those items at least once a week. And sometimes it's going to be like, oh, nothing new to discuss on that topic. But I think that if you have those areas of focus listed on your agenda, it will help you to stay on point. And I always tell my managers that these weekly owner-manager meetings are your way of bragging on what you do, because a lot of times owners may not have a clear understanding. And there are times that I've been in practices and an owner will say, I don't know what my manager does every day. Well, being a former hospital administrator, I have a great level of empathy as to what managers do. And we do a lot. So I think that that's your way of showcasing that. And when I say bragging, it's really just, keeping them abreast and informed. But also it's where our owners can keep a pulse on what their managers should be doing and actually hold them accountable. I am a firm believer that it's very important when you are setting deadlines for those that report to you, that you're always specific in stating, I want to make sure that this can be completed by this coming Friday at 5 p.m. or next Tuesday at 1 p.m. A lot of times I hear owners and speaking with their managers or managers with their healthcare team members and saying that, we need to get this done. And, I need to have it done as soon as possible. Your as soon as possible may not be what my as soon as possible is. So it's all relative. And that's why I think it's very important to establish a date and a time so that, you guys are on the same page. And if it's something that we need to extend the timeline, so be it. But a lot of times I think owners, managers get frustrated because they're expecting things to get done. But out of fairness, they haven't provided a deadline, including a date and a time. So I think that that's what these weekly owner manager meetings are good for. Owners, holding their managers accountable, and managers truly having the ability to showcase all of the work that they do. And sometimes I'll have it where my managers will have like a whiteboard, and it will like list all of the items that they're working on. And there could be 20 to 30 items that they have to stay on top of. Then you have this weekly meeting and the owner is adding 5, 10 more things. And it's like, okay, this is what I had listed as my priority. Let's make sure that those 5, plus items that you're bringing up will obviously help me stay on track. And I think that's where those weekly meetings help things to be less chaotic, so that you are planning in advance for year end. You're planning in advance for, looking at if we have to adjust our fees because of anticipated pay increases, with cost of living or something along those lines. So always, crossing your T's, dotting your I's, making sure that that line of communication is open so that no one's caught off guard. And I think that honestly, I used to meet with my owner once a week, and I know how valuable that time was. We were pretty much always on point with business, but sometimes, it was a time that we didn't have as much of an agenda, but it still gave us a chance to step away from the practice. We always would check on each other's families and things like that, but a lot of times it was just agenda. And then sometimes it's like, we've done what we've needed to do so that it's not so overwhelming. And those might be far and few between type of meetings, but they're very nice when they do occasionally pop up.
Okay. Just really what I understood there was it really helps to manage expectations and deliverables between the owner and the managers, though, right? And just so we're clear on, just beyond being organized, is there a specific mindset or a cultural value that really sets the successful practices apart from scramblers?
Yeah, I mean, it even goes down to like, say if you're in the midst of recruiting or you're preparing for team evaluations. I literally have had some owners and managers, because I do on-site consults, so I'm there in the practice. And they're like, oh, I have so-and-so's evaluation today at 2:00 and it's 11:00 and they haven't done the evaluation. And this is like an annual evaluation that they are haven't even prepared for. This is probably one of the, formal times that they're sitting down and evaluating their employee. And out of fairness to that employee, out of fairness to yourself, it's really important that you're planning in advance. So whether it's something on a personnel front, financial, I really like to have somewhat of a tickler system. So I know when reviews are coming up or when I'm having to meet with my accountant, and almost giving myself 30 days in advance to plan to make sure, I'm making a list so that when I speak to my consultant, I speak to my accountant, I have a list that I can discuss during our call versus, darn it, I knew there was something I forgot to mention to them. Giving those team members, more, I would say giving them more justice in the sense that they need more than just a few minutes for us to rush through an evaluation. So my practice is that scramble. It is, like I said, I'm a procrastinator. I'm not happy about that, but I've somewhat perfected it and I know what needs to be done so that I'm still successful in accomplishing meeting deadlines, things along those lines. But a lot of folks are not maybe natural procrastinators and they get themselves in a bind. And I think that's where mistakes can happen. I think that's where things can fall through the cracks. And from an optics perspective, if you are in the midst of recruiting and you don't have your act together, rest assured from our body language and how we're coming across to those potential employees, they're going to be able to read between the lines to say, wow, they really don't have their act together. And the same thing in an evaluation, if you go through an evaluation and you have NA not applicable on, most of their criteria that you're evaluating, that's a cue to your employees that you really haven't done your due diligence in preparing for that evaluation, or maybe it's, going to be time for us to do an end of year count for inventory. And it's like, okay, it's November. Our accountant's in 30 days and you haven't done any planning whatsoever. and it just becomes so overwhelming. So I really can't stress enough how, when you are in fire engine mode, I think that's a way that we can describe it, when you are just always trying to get to the next room or to the next project. It's exhausting mentally, physically. And I think that from a leadership from a leadership perspective, I think that just causes unnecessary anxiety within the, four walls of your organization. And I think it does allow owners and managers to lose some credibility with their healthcare team members, and maybe even it's a rep or someone that you're having to meet with as it relates to the business of the practice. So I think it's very important to have clarity on what we need to focus in on. I like to, with my owners and managers, I have these checklists where this is what you should be doing on a daily basis as a manager, on a daily basis as an owner. Then it goes out to weekly, then it goes out to monthly, quarterly, and then annually. So it's just one of those things that it keeps people on top of what they need to do. And I think that, you won't have to scramble. And I think it will, if nothing else, build a sense of confidence in your abilities to run and manage your practice, where you don't feel like you're dropping the ball and, chasing your tail left and right with trying to, get things done on a day-to-day basis.
So many practice owners are juggling burnout, payroll, and big decisions about 2026. What's your approach to helping them bring order and confidence back into their planning process?
Right. Well, I do think that a lot of practices that work with my firm understand that fourth quarter, that when they have calls with us during either their monthly calls or their quarterly calls, that they are prepared to say, what should I plan on a cost of living increase? How should I be looking at fee increases? What should we, think about that we may not have had to think about during 2025? So I think it's important, whether you're a manager or owner, that you're kind of doing historical backtrack of, the last 9 months, 10 months of the year to say, these are things that went really, really well in our practice. These are some of the hiccups that we had. From a risk management standpoint, what can we do to plan for the year that's coming up to minimize those hiccups, to make sure that we have less, hurdles that we're having to deal with? So I think that ultimately, when you are, planning and getting ready for the next year, it really is almost evaluating exactly how the year has come to this point. And if you did see an increase in your new client numbers, why did that happen? It's almost like when I have clients that are trying to determine where they're going to put their marketing dollars. For me, it's very important that if we set up a booth somewhere, that when new clients come to our practice, that we can track how they heard about the practice. And we have this booth and absolutely no one comes in and mentions that booth, then more than likely we're not going to, for 2026, invest in that booth again, because we didn't get our return on investment. Versus, if there was something that we did, a community event, and oh my gosh, it was just phenomenal, then that might be something obviously that we would put resources toward again. So I really think that for planning for the future, it is a little bit of assessing the past or the current year, just to give you some guidance and direction as to what needs to be done. Also, in looking at your financials, if by chance your bottom line saw a nice increase, then it's almost like, hey guys, what we were doing throughout 2025, it worked. So we know that we need to continue to do so. But if you see some areas that didn't have that type of an improvement, then I think that's where you become strategic in saying, maybe our lab income wasn't where it needed to be. So we're going to have a lunch and learn with our lab company. We are going to focus in on ways that we can increase our lab income through education to our clients. Maybe we're going to implement a protocol that we now are going to be more intentional about recommending junior wellness panels for pets coming in during their annual visit, as well as senior wellness panels. If by chance our lab income is down, maybe we're going to look at how we can increase lab income as it relates to chronic medications. Maybe we haven't been recommending those ALTs quarterly when a pet is on an NSAID, or a phenobarb test every 6 months when a pet is on phenobarb. So there are ways that you can basically look at your profit centers and say, our exams weren't where they needed to be, lab wasn't where it needed to be, or dentistry. And then obviously being strategic about these are maybe 2 to 5 things that we can focus in on to help us get where we need to be from a benchmark perspective, from a revenue perspective, something that's just not the owner and manager discussing it. Now we're going to be strategic about how we're going to discuss it with the doctors, discuss it with the team members. And if it's honing in on the technicians more so than, CSRs, that you are mapping all of that out and planning so that obviously you can, start the year off right, and you have direction, you have those expectations that you mentioned to get things done, and you basically have a roadmap, you have a plan. So.
Okay, and when a leader is feeling completely overwhelmed, right? What's the first thing they should focus on to regain a sense of control?
So I help my clients in the sense that sometimes when they are contacting me, they are so overwhelmed because everything is an emergency. Rest assured, I've had clients calling in a panic, and if I'm in the air or lecturing, I may not be able to answer them that minute. But sometimes by the time that I'm able to reach them that evening, it's almost like, it kind of worked itself out. So the way that I like to approach things is, if there are 2 or 3 things that you're dealing with, what is truly urgent and what is it something that, yes, it needs attention, but if we have to prioritize, and now instead of trying to fix 3 things, that we're going to focus in on 1, not that we're forgetting 2 and 3, but we're just obviously mapping out our attention. And it's kind of like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? It's 1 bite at a time. So if we have 3 bites to take, we're not going to gobble them all at the same time. We're going to, take bite number 1, make sure that that's on track before we go to bite number 2, before we go to bite number 3. So that's where I can just help them take a stance or a stand back to kind of regroup, to say, yes, these are all important matters. But it's almost like when a doctor is doing a comprehensive physical exam, when they go through examining the pet, there may be a number of issues that they have to bring to that client's attention. But if you try to cover all those items in one setting, it's going to be overwhelming for the client. So if it's where, weight is an issue, that they need their teeth cleaned, maybe there's some mobility issues, depending on where they lie in your assessment, you're going to have to determine which one we're going to focus in on now. We can mention those other things to say that, yes, these are important, but it's important that we focus in on XYZ first before we actually can deal with the other areas. So whether it's dealing with your healthcare team, dealing with operations, the finances of the practice, same thing. If your bottom line is not where it needs to be, you can't panic. And that's why a lot of times I tell my DVM owners and managers, when when you go out through the practice and say, we can't afford to do this, we can't afford to do that, I think that's one of the worst things that you can do for your team, because who wants to work at an establishment where they can't afford to do anything? That is not building a strong sense of confidence in your organization. And in my opinion, basically what we need to do is probably increase revenue in one area or 2, multiple, and decrease expenses in another area. So if we are not where we need to be, then how about saying, hey guys, our lab income is 15% of gross. The industry benchmark is between 18 to 20%. This is what we need to do to help us get at least to the 3%. And that's, some of the things that I mentioned, focusing on chronic meds or finding ways that we can increase our lab income. They don't need to know we can't afford to do this, can't afford to do that, because that does nothing but put fear in your healthcare team. Whereas if we know that there's areas that we need to increase those revenue, increase the revenue, then that's where they can work collaboratively together and get things done. So it is one of those things of you can analyze, you can get so much out of your numbers, your KPIs that will give you an idea of where you're doing well, and then other areas of, yeah, we really need to hone in on these particular areas and kind of go from there.
So the number one thing an overwhelmed leader can do to regain a sense of control is not panic.
Exactly.
And then work out things from there.
Yes.
So Monica, veterinary leaders often focus on patient care, not necessarily business care. How can they build better systems, financial or organizational, that make year-end planning less stressful next time around?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, when it comes to minimizing the stress that you're going to subject, yourself to, your team to, it's really, like I said, having a roadmap. And there are certain things that you can do throughout the year that you have to have protocols, policies in place so that everything doesn't feel like it's about to implode. As a CVPM, as someone who always is going to advocate for leadership and management, I think it's really important for veterinarians to know that they are most productive and effective when they are in the exam room and in surgery generating revenue. Most of our DVMs did not learn how to be business owners, managers in vet school. And that's why I'm always going to advocate for having a management team. I love, solving problems, whether it's administrative, personnel. That's what I love to do. And that's what managers typically love to do. So it's almost like you stay in your lane as a doctor and do what you are really good at doing. And then obviously align, whether it's a team or a person within your operation, to oversee the training, to oversee, the monitoring of numbers, the operations, to oversee, effective communication, that we are holding those team meetings on a regular basis, that our job descriptions are up to date. So it's almost like, instead of it's like in a household, if you are in a 2-member household, there are going to be obviously things that can be done by 2 people. If you're by yourself, yes, it can get done, but it can be so much overwhelming that if you have the ability to obviously, say we have 20 things that need to get done and 10 goes to one person, 10 to another, it just makes things a lot easier. And I think that's the value of DVM ownership and management working together, that the doctor, that they're doing what obviously they're supposed to do as far as patient care. And then the business care is going to fall more so on management. It doesn't mean that the management team doesn't know anything about patient care, or that the ownership doesn't know anything about business care. It's just where our focus is, that we both play a very active, important role. And we kind of go from there as far as, this is what I'm going to hone in on. This is what you're going to hone in on. And that's really where those weekly owner manager meetings come into play. So it's very clear that I'm working on this and you're working on that, so that it doesn't become overwhelming for either party.
Gotcha. So it's that empowered delegation almost.
Yes, I like that. Yes. And it's not, there are sometimes I have managers, even owners, that instead of delegating, there's a little bit of abdication there. And we never want that to happen, where we just throw something on someone and get it done. We're not there to support them. But in the same breath, I don't want us micromanaging them either. So it's very important to make sure that they understand that they are being empowered, but they're not on an island by themselves. We're a team. I'm here to support you, but ultimately you've been put in this position, whether it's a lead, a manager, to get things like this done. And I wouldn't have put you in this position if I didn't trust your abilities, and what you can bring to the table. So I think there's, an opportunity to help empower individuals, knowing that sometimes we're going to make mistakes, but that's how we learn. And not to feel like you've once again got to that you have to once again micromanage everything that someone is doing in your practice, whether it's a doctor micromanaging that technician, a manager micromanaging their leads. Ultimately empower those individuals so that their jobs remain rewarding and challenging, where they build up the confidence to utilize their critical thinking skills, and to basically get things done. And what's important is that when you, as an owner, when you go on vacation, or a manager, when you go on vacation, if you've allowed these folks to do what they're supposed to, then guess what? You can have a vacation and you don't have to worry about being interrupted or having to, receive text messages or calls throughout the entire time that you're on vacation. So once again, as I mentioned before, all of this is intertwined, and the way that you can pull things together will really set the tone for how effective your year is going to be, and how chaotic or not your end of year planning will be.
For practices that want to enter 2026 with clarity and not chaos, what's one step they can take right now and help them get there?
So I think realizing that we are about 45 days away from the end of the year. And at this point, I would say that scheduling a meeting with your management team, with your, if it's just your manager, whomever, that try to schedule a meeting within the next 2 weeks so that you will have a full 30 days minus the holidays, that the practice may be closed. But, this is what we're going to do, say, day one. You can even map it out for either the entire month of December or week 1, week 2. But ultimately, even though we're kind of like in the 11th hour, so to speak, you can still get things done. You may not be able to get everything done, but once again, if you prioritize to say, these are the things that we have to get done before the end of the year. These are the things that we can move over until, say, the first quarter of the year. I would rather you prioritize things and pace yourself versus trying to get everything done and nothing actually really gets done. And then people are frustrated, people are angry, your blood pressure has risen. It's not worth it at the end of the day. Just realizing that patient care, client care, they come first. How we care for our employees, the culture that we're providing and trying to, create within the practice. All of those things, I think, if they are right, everything else is going to fall into place. So ultimately, I would say if you have 45 days, schedule time over the next couple of weeks to really get what needs to be done over the last 30 days of the month, and you'll be okay.
Okay, got it. And for our practice owners listening in, what's your one key takeaway from all this?
Let's see. My one key takeaway from all of this is that it really is what I said early on, is that I think it's imperative that whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, it is so much better to be proactive versus reactive. And that proactivity comes into play with the planning, with utilizing resources, the wonderful, resources that the Veterinary Business Institute provides to its members. It's one of those things that you don't have to try to do everything by yourself. A lot of what we do has been done before, so it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel. Just tap into resources and realizing that, you'll get through this, but don't make it more of a headache or, a nightmare for you, for your team, for your managers, if it doesn't have to be. So being proactive versus being reactive, I think that's key for anyone that's in ownership, management, leadership.
Gotcha. So thank you so much for that, Monica, for sharing your insight and reminding us that preparation isn't about scrambling. It's about strategy and being proactive. So you've shown us that financial stability and team confidence don't come from last minute fixes, but from systems and habits we built all year long. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Veterinary Business Podcast. Every week, we aim to help you strengthen your practice, support your people, and step into the next chapter of veterinary leadership with confidence. Don't forget the complimentary practice growth strategy session with Lila, a veteran in veterinary marketing and strategy, you will receive a detailed analysis of your clinic's online presence and a 12-month plan designed to help your practice grow, attract, and thrive. You can book your free session at Veterinary Business Institute, that's one word, veterinarybusinessinstitute.com/MSM. It's our way of supporting the incredible work you do every day. Thank you again for spending this time with us. As you close out this year, remember, the most successful practices don't just react to change, they prepare for it. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of your teams, and keep moving veterinary medicine forward.